Hey, everybody, we got another day of headlines. Some days I think I'll just look at this one single page I'm focusing on, the Drudge Report, and if there's nothing that interesting or worthy of context and commentary, I'll skip that day. But day after day, there's a lot of stuff in there that really needs explanation. So let's get right to it. Here we have on the front page, we got 50 days until the first vote. This is the first notable primary vote in Iowa. And this is from NPR. It's a left-leaning publication. However, they are very good at reporting on things from both sides of the aisle. And here they are putting forth this idea. This is the smoke-filled room idea that I've been telling you about for the past few weeks. That's happening both in the Republicans, both in the Democrats, where the bigwigs of the party, the guys who are smoking cigars in the back room, know they need to get rid of Trump, they need to get rid of Biden, and put in a different candidate in there, despite what maybe the voters will want, especially in Trump, who's very far ahead. So this article is pushing the idea about really the move to vote for somebody else other than Trump. It's telling people to get ready to maybe vote for another person. We already saw the Iowa governor endorse DeSantis. We see Nikki Haley being touted in the media as someone who probably can beat Trump, and the donors, the big donors, should open their wallets and move their money to her. Now the thing about Nikki Haley was presented as opinion pieces, but some of these other articles are just as news. But I think we have to understand the subterfuge behind them, the fear of the powers that be, that both Trump and Biden have so many negatives, so many unforced errors, so many problems with them as a presidential candidate, that they need to be replaced with someone else. Here we have some stuff about Congress. In times like this, when we have a lot of polarization, I know this happened in the 90s too. You've got a lot of people who just can't deal with it, with the screaming and the yelling and the kind of tone that the politics, especially in Congress, in the House and the Senate, has taken. So you get these old stodgy guys on both sides of the aisles who just want out. I don't know what kind of person there is out there who wants that sort of trouble to be in politics. Here we have just mentioned Haley again. This is a new article. I don't think we looked at this yesterday, but we did. This is the opinion piece, one of many opinion pieces that is really positing to the public or to the intelligentsia that Nikki Haley is going to be a better candidate rather than Trump, even though Trump has a commanding lead over everybody. Here we have good old Mitt Romney. This is a kind of an old-style Republican, the businessman. He's not really a social progressive or anything. He's a businessman. He's going to be the CEO of the country. He ran for president against Obama years ago, and he's been one of the voices in the Republican Party who has been very open in denouncing Trump's character, his behavior, which is untidy to say the least. A very strange situation here. We have to shrink learning gap. Certain districts in the U.S., they're separating their classes by race. They're taking out Black and Latino students, and they're being taught separately by a Black or Latino teacher, on the theory that the races cannot learn properly when they're all together. I suppose the concept is that racism creates a sense of insecurity and of maybe self-loathing, and this might be ingrained in minority students. And it would be interesting to see in the fullness of things if such an approach works. Many Americans, I would say most white Americans, mainstream middle-class Americans of all races would probably say that's ridiculous. That seems to be against what Western liberal democracy is about, erasing those differences that are superficial. But and I'm sure the people who are running this program now say it's working and all the stats show in their favor, but I want to wait for years later and see some independent viewpoints on this method of doing things. Here we have an article, People Leaving Texas Over Rising Costs. The only point about this is that it's one of those clickbaity articles that's a little bit surprising, because the narrative that we've heard for many years now is that Americans are leaving high-tax liberal states like New York and California and moving to low-tax conservative states like Texas. So this is just the opposite of what one would think they would hear about internal migration in the United States. That's what makes it a good article to show to people. It's just the opposite of what you think is supposed to be happening. This is something, Jordan is Palestine. Now, this does take a little explanation, and in this vein, you can't really say much about this without being labeled in one way or another. So this idea is that, and this has been around for decades, is that in all of the countries that surround Israel, there are huge populations of Palestinians. I think there's over 2 million Palestinians in Jordan, for instance. And so some people have just said, well, these people should be made citizens. They shouldn't be classed as refugees, and just integrate into those countries that they're already in. And anyone who posits that is thought to be, is often slammed, because that would be a case against having the Palestinian two-state solution, meaning we have Israel and we have the Palestinians in the West Bank and in Gaza. And some people who were opposed to that and just would say, well, Israel should run the whole thing, would just say, well, there are all these Palestinians in the other countries. You know, countries like Jordan, they're run by a small clique of really rich people of a certain ethnic persuasion. They don't want their political system to be swamped by a bunch of Palestinians, so these people are kept as refugees, classed as refugees. A lot of them do have Jordanian citizenship. And so you could see how this would be a controversial situation. And on to that, we have the idea of the right of return. And the right of return is like, say, once the final agreements are made, and the Palestinians are running everything in the West Bank and Gaza Strip to everyone's satisfaction, then you have right of return, which means all the countries that surround Israel would send back the millions of Palestinians that live in their country or that are part of their country to be resettled in the new Palestinian states. And of course, Israel would say, well, we don't want to do that. That'll swamp the existing structures, and you're just trying to get rid of an ethnic group that you don't want to be upsetting the political situation, like in Jordan. So you could see how complicated these situations are, and anyone who has an opinion on one side or another is slammed with a lot of negativity. And you know, on top of it, and I'm just talking about these situations as if they're not other countries out there, such as Iran, that also has reason not to want a peace in that region. So this shows how it's not just Palestinians having their own land. There's other countries that have that have interests one way or another in the ultimate solution. And that's what's made it very complicated to work out over these decades. Marty Krofft, dead. This is a big thing in the States. It's kind of a low-rate version of the Muppets. The guy did these puppet things big in the 70s. I don't know if this is worth looking into, but I laughed. I don't know why I laughed, but it's just one of those funny headlines with a lot of junk stuffed in it. King Charles secretly profits off assets of dead Brits using medieval law. I don't know. Not of interest to me. Low budget Olympics. Lots of history there of countries going in deeply into debt and having big, huge $100 million facilities that go dead with no usage after the Olympics. Of course, those countries or the cities, they do it for cred and they print a lot of money, and it can ruin or hurt their economy. So I'm sure the Olympics Committee has to look a lot more closely to see that countries are not getting themselves in the trouble for the prestige of grabbing an Olympic hosting slot. Americans under 30 don't trust religion or anything else. Is it any wonder at this point? Yeah. This is something that upsets politics in different ways. It's something that I'm interested in because we saw how people were so shocked that anyone could vote for Trump in 2016, yet a lot of people did. And now we have the media kind of shocked that young people in particular, who they were counting on supporting the existing administration of Biden, seem to be upset about inflation and foreign wars and even immigration. And as I've shown in a few other previous segments, you have the media. The best example is New York Times trying to explain to people that everything is great, and you're just kind of confused or wrong if you think that things aren't wonderful, or that you try to lay it at the feet of the present administration. So sometimes we get into trouble when we try to ignore the unease or the distrust, especially of young people, of the government. And that's a situation it seems that the U.S. is in at this moment. And, if you're fearful of Trump, as a lot of people are, all of this unease, it means votes for Trump. And it's going to take more than the New York Times trying to tell people they're wrong to feel unease about the economy to solve that problem. This is incredible. I mean, who would have thought at the beginning of this situation with Iran trying to take over Ukraine that Ukraine could be openly sending and hitting Moscow with drone strikes. Wow. And, anybody who would read this from a military perspective would say, what does this tell us about Russian preparedness? I mean, Russia is really showing its weakness by being able to be hit like this by poor little Ukraine, which is the beginning. Everybody thought that Russia was going to waltz in there, but no, they've been dragged into a quagmire. My gosh. Now, I had something I was going to say about this. I know. The reasons for and against the war in Ukraine. Here we have, the general public, both probably in North America, United States, and Canada. I don't know about Mexico, but we have people not feeling comfortable about wanting to be involved, sending hundreds of billions of dollars every few months to new foreign wars. And this sort of thinking is understandable considering all the drumbeat in the media for many years now, starting with George W. Bush, who had his kind of his wars in Afghanistan and a very much an elective war in Iraq. There might have been some justification for those. That administration, the Bush administration, was terrible at explaining why they were doing it and when things went wrong, what was going to happen then. But we had a drumbeat in the media that said war was terrible because women and children could get hurt from it. And I might have been more hawkish before, like many people. You know, the U.S. had done a lot of interventions over the years. We'd been, in the first Gulf War, we were successful. So we were probably thinking we can do anything. So by the end of the George Bush administration, I think many Americans sort of believed that. Yeah, we shouldn't get involved in war. We shouldn't send the money away. We've got debts. We're just causing young kids and women to be killed. So now we're in another administration on another party. It's the Democrats, and we seem to be going very quickly to support and be involved in and send military supplies to two new huge wars. And one of them is most people never even heard of, the Ukraine and Russia going in. And who cares if Russia controls the Crimea? What if Russia's a bigger power than or diminishes because it doesn't have access to the Black Sea? Who cares? This is what many Americans feel by this point. Now, on the other side, when all is said and done, we probably need to support what's happening. We need to support Ukraine against Russia. Is, you see, what Russia is doing, particularly there, it's a blow against the international order that's existed since World War II. Now, you can cite all kinds of other difficult situations that have happened that seem to go against this, to say, well, what about this war? What about this? But in general, the international order has banded together to look down upon when one country just says, we're just going to march into this other country and take it because we want it for some reason. There's the movement to international organization and trade liberalization, this sort of a thing. And what Russia's doing is a strike against that international order. And this has caused other countries, I would suggest China, to feel that for this reason, the breaking of the international order now, it might be the time to decide they want to go back and take over Taiwan. Maybe they want to go down and further extend this situation in the South China Seas where they're seemingly trying to make enemies out of all the little countries that surround that area in China, which in itself is a crazy thing. You see, if China were rational, they would not be antagonizing the Philippines, Vietnam, blah, blah, blah. They would say, here's some free advice for China. They would say, these little islands between us, Vietnam, here's what we'd like you to do. We're going to give you those islands. We disputed them. We're going to give you, but maybe we're going to have some a little military port that we co-run in Vietnam. They could do the same thing with the Philippines. They could use these islands and they would make friends and have military alliances as opposed to causing everyone to think they're enemies. That's just an aside. So back to Ukraine. So in general, it's probably a better idea to try to maintain the international order and oppose countries like Russia that just decide, we're just taking this Ukraine back because we want it for some reason. It's a big violation of international standards. And what was the other thing? I had one other idea here. Oh, the other idea is about issues of treaties and nuclear disarmament. I mentioned this a few days ago. It was in 94. There were a lot of agreements between 1994 and 1996 after the breakup of the Soviet Union that the former Soviet republics like Kazakhstan, like Ukraine, signed in order to give all their nukes back and send them back to Russia. So the world just had to deal with one nuclear power instead of a bunch of new ones that were created from the breakup of the Soviet Union. And with that, the United States and the UK and tacitly NATO essentially said, the agreement said Russia will never invade these countries, even though, because if you got nukes, it's less likely that you're going to attack them because you do have that backup. But now Russia can just roll over, in theory, could roll over Ukraine, and as a final stopgap, they don't even have nukes to hold them off. So anybody who cares about nuclear disarmament would be against the situation where Russia is invading Ukraine and violating all those agreements that said they never would. In exchange for the Ukraine giving up its nukes, Russia says, we're never going to try to take you over by violence, this sort of a thing. And when that happened a couple of years ago, when Russia rolled in, the countries that were signatory, UK, US, NATO, they were like, well, we were not backing that up, I guess. Russia called our bluff. And to be fair, Russia had been doing that for quite a few years because they had been funding those separatist groups in Chechnya and all those little states down in there to slowly put in new governments that were connected to Russia, and in some cases re-annex those. And the West just said, well, what can we do? So anyway, these are some of the ideas for and against the very difficult situation of supporting these big foreign wars. A little more about Argentina. We've talked about that. Here's the counterpoint. We got Trump here, and now here's the counterpoint. In both cases, all these articles coming out in the media are positing that these candidates are the wrong candidate. Biden and Trump, they need to be replaced one way or another. It's another good word salad of funny things in a headline. It's not really funny, but it's a weird headline. Dancing slave monkeys kept, found to have disturbing levels of constant stress. I guess it wouldn't be fun. Puerto Rico, artificial glacier growing in the desert. This is interesting. It's not really anything for context, but I like these ideas where somebody tries to do something to change or modify the environment, creating artificial glacier somehow. I hope he can do it. But hey, I've talked about my other book, my novel, but this is a previous book called Last Century. This is a collection of memoirs formed as short stories about many of the things that have happened to me, being caught in the Bayonne by the Khmer Rouge over 30 years ago, travels to Myanmar, adventures being bit by a snake in the jungle. This is the story of some of the way life was in the 1990s when Southeast Asia were junior members of the Asian tigers, and their economies were booming, and everything was under pressure, the culture, the ethnicity. So that book is available on Amazon and Kindle. I'd be happy if you read it and let me know what you think. And before we go, every day we've been looking at the Art of War cards. And we pick a card and it has some axiom from the Art of War. And we see if... okay. This is a good one, I think. We have feign foolishness. Fake it. Fake being a dummy. Now, why can't I get this? Feign foolishness. Strategy. Pretend to be ignorant while making meticulous plans. Basis. Foolish minds do not arouse suspicion. So there's our advice for today. Feign foolishness. Fake being a dummy. Suppose you could say this is also about just don't let other people know your plans. Don't talk about your big plans and everything you're going to do maybe more than people trying to foil you, people will tell you not to do it or to give up, and they'll list all the reasons why you shouldn't do it. So just let them think you're a dummy. So anyway, that's today's headlines. A lot of good stuff. There'll be a lot of great stuff going into the new year, and we're going to get revved up for the elections next year and see if the party leaders of the Democrats and the Republicans, the shadowy figures who exist in the back rooms, smoking the cigars, filling the rooms with smoke, will be able to replace Trump and Biden as at the head of the tickets next year. We'll see that. So until next time, bye-bye.